Some people think that, when you hear traveling on a budget, that you're going to be backpacking, living in hostels, or giving up comfort. And that can be the case, but it doesn't have to be. Hi, I'm Annette, host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast and founder of the Millionaire Insider. My mission is to help you simplify the money game so you can create a financially secure and fulfilled life without having to have a PhD or spend countless hours on your finances. You're going to learn how to think like a millionaire, stop worrying about money and wondering if your financial house is truly in order, and instead spend your time doing what you love. With over 3 decades advising 7, 8, and even 9-figure millionaires, and now joining that elite group, I'm in a unique position to help you make the best financial choices so you can create a secure financial future and retirement you love. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. Today's free resource is our retirement plan checklist. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/RPC. The retirement plan checklist is a guide so that you can go through and make sure that you've got everything checked off and just make sure you're not going to have surprises in retirement. We have probably a combined 80 years in creating this with all the advisors who have offered input on it. And it's what we've seen over the years of what people that have successful retirements do differently than others. So I encourage you to access it at themillionaireinsider.com/RPC. For today's show notes, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/125. MillionaireSeries.com copyrights all materials and intellectual property. This information is intended for general informational purposes only. It is not intended to replace any advisor or specialist or to provide any investment, financial, tax, retirement planning, or healthcare advice. It is not intended to substitute personalized investment advice or any professional advice. For additional disclosures and insight, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/ERS-disclosure. By accessing this content, you agree to hold MillionaireSeries.com and its affiliates harmless for results achieved or not achieved. So today's episode, travel on a budget, is something that so many people bring up. And it was interesting. I was just having a conversation with a friend and she said, if I could afford to, I would do more traveling. And what I find, whether you got a ton of money or not so much, is the fact that it matters to all of us, right? Making good money choices, whether it's relating to travel or spending or anything in between. So what we're going to do today is really focus in on travel and what we can do to really live within our budget. Many people want to see the world, but they don't want to drain their nest egg. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is how can you travel smart and on a budget without feeling like you're going to run out of money or feeling like you're missing out because you can't travel as much as you want. Many people dream of traveling. And I can admit that when I didn't have money, I just could not wait until I could travel. In fact, when I was younger, my game plan was that I was going to be a flight attendant. I was going to be able to travel all over the world and I was going to learn 5 languages. And then at 18, I flew on my first plane and I realized I didn't really like flying. And I also realized that after thinking I was going to be a nurse and almost passing out when I saw blood, thank goodness I went into money. But it was like, okay, I can do a lot of things being a financial advisor, not only helping people, but also making money. And so it turned out to be a really great option. That said, my game plan of wanting to travel, because I've been a top producer for so many years, I have been all over the world and it's great. And I've had a wonderful time, but it's not really on my bucket list. That said, it is on my husband's. And so we are working together to figure out how we can travel more and go do things. When I go traveling, partly because I work so much, is all I want to do is just sit on a beach and relax and do nothing. And it's like, why don't we just go to our home that's overlooks the ocean, which is my ideal scenario. I don't really like being on the beach. So it's just funny. But regardless, whether you want to go on vacation and just veg or you want to go and see the world, the point is many people do want to have that experience. And that's what we're talking about today. Some people think that, when you hear traveling on a budget, that you're going to be backpacking, living in hostels, or giving up comfort. And that can be the case, but it doesn't have to be. There was a story about a woman who was in her mid-60s and she had recently retired. She thought she was going to have to give up on her dream of seeing certain places, but she created a plan around it with an advisor. And she was able to travel on a very limited budget. And it was so fascinating to look at things she was doing, from getting discounts on flights, car rentals, and even meals. So it is possible. Sometimes you just have to get creative. There was another story that they shared about two sisters who moved to Europe, and they had a combined retirement income of $55,000. And not only were they able to live very comfortably in Europe, but they were able to travel throughout Europe and even other countries, which had been a dream of both of theirs. So it is possible. One of the things that's great about travel is it can enhance your life, your quality of your life, even mental clarity, even being able to see the world. It can increase your joy, your connection. And one of the things I will say for me, as far as traveling to different countries, is being able to just really see how fortunate we are and how privileged we are, and to really just get a perspective of how other people live. Ironically, 10 years ago, we spent a month in Spain. And it's funny because one of my clients is spending a month in Spain right now with their family. And it was interesting because the funny thing was that so many of the places over there are so much smaller than here. So you really have to make really conscious choices. Now, I personally love that. One of the things I love about our condo that overlooks the ocean is that it's small. It's only 2 bedrooms. Now, it's maybe 16 or 1,900 square feet. So it's not super small, but it only has 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and then a big living area and a kitchen. But what's so great is you just don't have a lot of stuff. And for me, I love that. Whereas, our other homes are larger and the home we're building is really large. And so you just end up starting getting more and more stuff. But I do love the whole concept of less is more. And I think that's something that travel really puts in perspective, because a lot of times where you're staying, you can't have a lot of stuff. Like, you can't take a lot of stuff. And so it just makes you be more conscious. And I think it can actually even then roll over to when you're back here in the States, maybe in your big house, realizing, hey, do I really need all this stuff? And that simplifying your life, in my opinion, is always a good thing. But, one of the things that I also see is that the people that are able to travel and that are able to see the world are ones that really make their financial plan a priority, as well as making sure that they are budgeting for it. So that instead of spending money on eating out or spending money on things that are more costing money but aren't really providing life experiences that travel can, are the ones that are able to do the traveling they want. And so a large part of that is just really getting clear on what you say yes to and what you say no to. One of the mindset shifts that I've seen working with millionaires, and it's kind of like how millionaires travel. And what's interesting is most people think, oh, they just do whatever they want. That's not true at all. They are very, very clear on how they're spending their money. And one of the things that I have seen in my clients, which is really interesting, is that they're more focused in on the experience of what they're doing versus the price tag. And it's funny because some of them would never, ever fly first class. They would never stay at a really super expensive hotel. And so it's not a right or a wrong, but it's the point being is that you can really enjoy yourself and have the experience you want, see the world without spending a ton of money. They're very intentional and value-based and even strategic. A lot of them will rent a home and then have their entire family or family and friends come and visit them there, which is also, I think, a great idea. Now, some of them have joined home trade groups where it's like you pay a certain amount and then you get to put your house in it and you can go and stay at different places and somebody comes and stays at your home. I think that could work if you're open to that and you knew that it was going to be a higher caliber of people that were going to do it versus just anyone staying in your home. The other thing you can also do is swap homes. And it's interesting because one of the multimillionaires that I know, he wanted to do a swap with one of our homes. And I mean, he lives in California overlooking the ocean. It's incredible. And I was like, oh my gosh, at the time I was thinking, I don't know. But I think as I get older and as I approach retirement, I'd be more open to that. You don't have to wait for a windfall to be able to do this. With the right formula and the right plan and consistent action, you can. And I think that's so important because so many people wait too long and then whatever they wanted to do or achieve or experience, sometimes it's too late. Let's talk about 3-step budget travel planning framework. So the first thing is you got to be really clear on how you're spending your money. I encourage you to create a specific travel fund category that you're going to spend on travel. Determine how much discretionary income is available each year and be really clear on what you're spending money on. Hopefully you have your needs, which are your must-haves, your mortgage if you have one, insurance, taxes, utilities, basic food, and then all the other things that are your wants, those are your discretionary spending. And if you really truly want to travel, you just need to cut from that line of the budget. And it's not that difficult. Consider getting a remote job. Some of our friends' kids recently got remote jobs where they're working all over the world and they can travel everywhere they want. They are just having the time of their lives. Now, the key there is you got to make sure you have good internet. My cabin is not great internet. In fact, I just got back from there 2 days ago. Like, I'm not going to stay up there. And when I have meetings, it's so much easier to be in my office. But we have both Suddenlink as well as the local internet. I go back and forth. And if Suddenlink's working, it's great. And if it's not, it's not, right? Now, the interesting thing is our home in Mexico, that has the best internet of all of our homes and office. It is so good. And it's kind of funny that it's so good. And yet here it's not as good in the United States. So again, you got to be aware of that because sometimes you really need a good internet connection. Now, if it was critical that I had an internet connection, I could go down to our country club. They have super duper great internet. And so that is an option. So you just want to make sure that you have a backup plan if you really need it. Some people use their tax refunds to travel. They have a side hustle or they use their RMD. Now, the key is to really figure out what you can afford. Now, some people, as I mentioned, my friends' kids, they actually are working and earning money so they can travel. I've seen people that are pre-retirement do that. I've even seen people who are more retired do that. So again, you got to figure out what works for you, but there are so many options. All right, the next thing you want to do is you've got to create a plan as soon as you can and then monitor it. If you're in the position where you can start traveling, you want to always be pre-booking and looking for the best deals. Watch for flights early on. And there are a lot of different venues. Just go online and search for cheap flights. And then once you find the right source, then start using it. I'm not going to name names because ones pop up and then they go away, but there are a lot of them. And then also consider off-season traveling. And you can save 20 to 60% if you're willing to go in the off-season. So that's something to be really aware of. And then step 3, you want to decide your travel style. Do you want to go somewhere where it's really fast-paced, you have a lot going on, or slow, where you can really relax? For me, slow relaxing is huge. And it's not that I don't like to go to like a museum or I don't like to go places, but I like to be on a really, really slow, like almost like a type D personality, which is not what I'm like most of the time. And so it's kind of funny because my husband just loves going and doing things. And so we have to compromise. I just like relaxing and hanging out and like working on my blog or working on my outlines. That I find really relaxing and enjoyable. And I also like reading books. Sandra Brown is my go-to author, and I've literally read almost every one of her books. And so I find that great because it just relaxes my mind. I also find doing things like when I'm up at my cabin doing projects, I find that really relaxing because it just takes your mind off it. Now, big announcement. I just golfed for like the 4th or 5th time in my entire life. And I actually was able to hit the ball. I was actually doing okay. I got a bogey on one of the holes. It was really impressive. My kids were up for the 4th. And so as a family, we went and it was really fun. I mean, I just had so much fun and it was just a relaxing time. Somebody was saying, oh, it's so stressful. And I said, well, the funny thing about it is it's a different type of stress and you forget about everything that's going on. I think one of the things tied to that is the fact that I don't play competitively. Like the only reason I know I got 5 on 1 is because I was really paying attention because I was doing so well. If I'm not doing well in a hole, I just pick up my ball and I go. I don't have any need to like win the game. And I think that's something you got to look at. My youngest son, who's actually really got potential as being a golfer, but he just thinks it's the dumbest game ever. I said, you don't have to hit every ball and you don't have to play competitively. We're going out there just to have a good time and enjoy it. You want to determine as far as where you want to travel, local, regional, or international. And all of those come with different objective and different goals and different price tags. So again, you want to be aware of that. If you're traveling solo, maybe you want to go with a group. If you're a couple, maybe you go together, or you can do things where it's more of a family trip. The key there is to just remember that budgeting doesn't mean less. It means making smarter choices and planning ahead. And I think one of the reasons why I find it so frustrating is because I'm not really good at that. I spend so much time planning for my clients and being on top of all of that I think when it comes to my own travel, I'm just not as organized or as focused on it. And so it all falls on my husband, which works out well because he's the one that wants to travel. But again, you got to take that into account. All right, let's look at some proven budget travel tips. Number one, consider traveling off peak. Better prices, fewer crowds. It's just plain cheaper. National parks, for the ones that are still open, going to Europe, Alaskan cruise, maybe even going to Asia. There's a lot of options. Consider using credit card rewards or miles. Book flights and hotels using accumulated points. We have done that. I have a lot of points. I don't know if I have 1 million, but I've got close to it. And it's funny because we don't normally use that. Most of the traveling I do is related to business. So it's a business expense. That is something that we use when it's not business related. But it's, again, something to just be aware of. And I have two of my cards that give us points and then one that gives me cash back. And then always make sure that you're not using a credit card that's got a high interest rate or that you can't pay off. One of the things that I have seen people do, and this is people that don't have money and do, is that they start getting so caught up in getting points to travel that they end up overspending or having a balance on their credit card. So don't let that be you. That is not the goal. Consider bundling your travel for discounts. You can get packages for airline and hotel. Cruise deals are everywhere, and that includes oftentimes gratuities and food that's included. We like to stay at all-inclusives when we take our kids because even though my husband and I don't eat a lot, boy, we save thousands of dollars with not having our kids eating out. Consider rail passes. There's a lot of options there. When we went to Europe, boy, it was several years ago, my daughter had to do a report on transportation. And we literally went to 5 countries and we did all the different transportation. And one of the things we did a couple of the nights is we slept on a train. And it was really interesting. I thought it was so fascinating and it was such a great experience. And it was kind of like you paid for the travel and you got a free hotel. So that's something also to consider. You don't have to be really fancy. Sometimes what people do is they'll stay a really nice place or an expensive place. And a few of the days they'll stay in places that are much cheaper and not as fancy because they are just like in between and they're not going to be able to be there very long. And so it doesn't make as much sense to pay a lot of money. Renting homes or apartments with kitchens can also be a great way of saving money. Or if you're like me and you've got really a lot of food allergies and sensitivity, it's so nice to be somewhere where you have a kitchen. In fact, I can't remember the last time we stayed someplace we did not have a kitchen. I just need a kitchen because, I need a blender. I need something where I can have my own food. Consider using hotel points for weekend getaways. My husband's had a ton of those through his corporate career and they come in handy. And then always ask for senior or military discounts if that's applicable. Consider eating like a local. Shop at the local markets. Eating a lunch or even a later lunch versus a dinner can save you a lot of money. In fact, there's a restaurant in Mexico that if you go before 4 o'clock, it's 50% off. Now, I would love to tell you that we're so disciplined we've done that, but that wouldn't be true. I don't know if we've ever done it. Maybe one time. Normally doesn't happen, but it's such a great concept. And I think if money was a really big issue, hey, you could be there at 3:30 and have your dinner by 4. I actually love eating earlier. I just love it. I feel so much better. But again, look what works for you. And then share plates. One of the things my husband and I do is we almost always share our food. And it's not only is it great because you save money, but it's also great for calories. And for me, it's great because I don't like to be so full that I feel, ugh. So it's just been great. We don't always, but if we don't, then what we typically do is we'll eat about half of our food and then we have a meal for the next day. And I find this interesting. One of my sons is really good at that. My daughter's really good at that. My other son is terrible at it. I don't do leftovers. I'm like, okay, well then don't over order, because I don't have a problem paying for a meal, but if you're not going to eat it all, I do. When you can, use public transit and or walk. This can save hundreds of dollars, if not thousands, on a trip. And again, focus in on the pace you want and on the experience. The goal is having a rich experience, just enjoying yourself. And that's why I find that when you go to Europe, you really do need a good amount of time, because it just takes you time to get over there and get acclimated before you start your experience. And then I encourage you to travel with purpose. Consider looking at going somewhere on an educational or a service or even a spiritual retreat. Those can be really powerful. And then consider travel clubs. There's also Road Scholars, and there are group tours for seniors. I personally don't like single women traveling by themselves. I personally would not be comfortable with doing that. So I encourage you to just be careful. I have friends that do, and they love it, and they've not had problems. But again, be careful. I want to share a real life story about a couple. They were about 60, and they wanted to travel every year without dipping into their principal. Initially, with their guaranteed income, their cash reserve, and their other sources of revenue, they had about $6,000 a year that they could earmark on travel, and it really wasn't enough. So what we did is we really looked at their spending plan. We separated out their needs versus their wants, and we were able to literally double their travel budget. They were able to go on actually 2 trips a year, one domestic and one international. And it was just a game changer. And the one thing they said, which I've heard so many people say, is that it really was amazing to be able to travel and not worry about having enough money or running out of money. And I think that's the key. You don't want to be traveling at the risk or the expense of running out of money. All right, I want to give you a couple of pitfalls to avoid. Overspending too early in your retirement, not knowing how much you're going to need over the course of your and your partner's life, using high interest rate cards for travel when you really can't afford it, booking deals that really aren't deals. You got to be really careful. Not considering medical insurance when you're traveling. Don't get into the comparison trap or living like the Joneses. People bragging or showing pictures about their amazing trip, and you're like, oh, we got to do that. I find it fascinating. I always wonder sometimes when you look at Instagram, like how many people really stay at the places they take pictures at. It's almost like they go to some fancy restaurant for dinner and then they have a picture. But I always wonder, because I know how much it costs. Like when you go to some of these places that are super expensive, and if some of these people are doing that, they are probably using credit cards and they shouldn't be. So don't get caught up in that. And then don't wait too long to travel. One of our friends shared over the 4th, they said the one regret they have is that they didn't travel when they were younger. And now it's kind of a problem because they're getting older and they really can't. So don't postpone it until either your health declines or one of you can't travel. It's not ideal. Let's look at some action steps. First of all, decide on what are your priorities. Where do you want to be spending your money? And then create a budget travel line item in your spending plan if that is a priority. Set up auto transfer so it just goes into your travel fund, and make it difficult to get. You want to review your Medicare and or insurance to make sure you have coverage. One of my friends was sharing that her friend is paying half of what she's paying for Medicare because they only have coverage in the Metro Phoenix area in Maricopa County. And she goes, well, that's not going to work for us because we travel. Be really clear on that. And if you don't have travel insurance or medical insurance that covers, get it. Download the retirement plan checklist at themillionaireinsider.com/RPC and go through that and just identify what all items you have done, which ones you need to do. And then if there are some that you don't really care about, that's fine. But what you don't want to do is get into retirement and go, oh, I wish I would have known that. So let's recap. Travel does not have to require a huge bank account or a budget. It does require the right mindset and a plan. You want to focus in on the purpose of travel, your planning, as well as what you want to accomplish, and not trying to keep up with what other people are doing. If you want to travel more, start your plan now. Even one small weekend getaway is a step toward your dream life. And one of the things I think that for me is if we didn't have a home in the mountains, a home in the desert, a home on the beach, I probably would want to travel more. But it's so nice being at one of my houses where I've got everything I need. The thing that's funny is one of my friends came over and she goes, "Oh my God, I can't believe this place. Our cabin is really, it's very unique, but it's just really awesome." And she goes, "I can't believe you don't just stay up here all the time." And what's so funny is I think that when you have that and you can, then you don't. Because I remember when I didn't have money and sometimes I would go and stay up in the community where our cabin is. And I would just be, "Oh, I just wish I could stay up here for longer." And so it's just interesting how sometimes when we have things, we just kind of take it for granted. But it is kind of a reminder to me, too, to really enjoy it. And then to also just, be aware of how you're spending your money and not overspending. Probably the best news of all is that simply by incorporating a few of these steps, it's going to allow you to travel more. It's going to allow you to stop worrying about money and wondering if you're going to run out of it. And it's really going to help you to live a retirement and life you love. So I encourage you to really start sooner rather than later so you don't wake up and really regret that you didn't do the things you wanted to do. So I want to thank you so much for joining me. I'm Annette. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now. If you love the content of this podcast, please follow and subscribe to our channel so you get notified of episodes, and also give us a 5-star review and share a comment. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money, or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order so you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for Next Step Finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.